Major Democratic donor Ed Buck is behind bars, charged with felony counts of causing a serious injury to people and running a drug den. Now, the arrest comes after a third man is alleged to have overdosed at his Hollywood home in West Hollywood. From meth, that is. Now, that man has survived, but the district attorney is accusing Buck of injecting the victim with a deadly dose. Buck has also been accused of preying on at-risk men while donating thousands of dollars to Democratic candidates and organizations. Well, we got to ask some hard questions, so we bring in our 360 view. We bring in our political panel, Democratic strategist Ameshia and Carrie, Sheffield, national editor of Accuracy and Media. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies, on this.
Absolutely. Thanks for being
Scottie.
Okay, so I want to start with you, Ameshia. Did politics play a role in this fact that Ed Buck's arrest taking it this long? I mean, 3 overdoses and 2 men dead, and there were protests outside of his house saying, hello, put attention on this man. Do you think politics played a role in this delay?
I absolutely think politics played a role in this delay, but I think that there's something else that's missing in this story. The fact that LGBT organizations also played a role in this. There were several African-American LGBT members who have protested this guy and stood outside of his house and have tried to raise alarms for over a decade at this point, and no one cared. No one cared because all of his victims were African-American males, many of them of the indigent population, and he basically was utilizing them, and no one was really missing them. And I think that we really have to take into context the fact that a lobby that is so large and has such a strong voice, the LGBTQ population does, they really didn't care about these people either. So I think that there is the political side in terms of him being a big name donor, but I also think that there's something bigger here when you see these large organizations that come and speak out on any and everything else, but literally did not care about the victims. And he has a long list of victims.
And that's the thing. This is where it kind of does become political. Is normally those organizations speak on behalf of the Democratic Party, which he was a major donor to. So it's going, Carrie, there's a lot of guilt by association right now. We are talking Weinstein, Epstein. Now we got Ed Buck, who the LA District Attorney said was actually a violent, dangerous sexual predator. I mean, those are harsh words. Who mainly preys on men made vulnerable by addiction and homelessness. Now, Buck personally administered these dangerously large doses and is a predator with no regard for human life. Therefore, should those who've associated with him, more importantly, those who accepted political funds and donations from him, also be held accountable for this now? And as you said, 10 years we've known about this man.
Well, I absolutely think they should return his donations immediately. As is the case with any criminal procedure, I do want to note that we need due process for him or any other person accused of a heinous crime. That being said, I agree with the other guests that the fact that this alarm had been raised for such a long time and that there was not a serious and more serious investigation, it is very deeply troubling. And I think that is just a nonpartisan situation, that no matter who is being accused of these sorts of crimes, the processes that people need to collect evidence and really find the way to make these charges in a credible way. I do think, just if we're going to get into the politics, since you asked if this is political, I do think that the Democratic Party has taken the African-American vote and the African-American population for granted for decades. And when you look at policies that actually make a difference in the lives of African-Americans, whether it's school choice, whether it's opportunity zones, whether it's criminal justice reform signed by Republicans and President Trump, there are so many issues that the African-American community can work with conservatives and Republicans on, and it's a two-way street. Republicans need to reach out, but vice versa, just making sure that people are having those conversations.
But that's the thing, Carrie, as you point out, and now this is Ted Lieu, Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, lots of very powerful Democrats. But when we politicize any situation, unfortunately, we don't actually find a solution to the problem that, you're right, is nonpartisan. In this case, though, Republicans could have stepped in for the last 10 years also on his behalf. This would have been a great opportunity. One, why did Republicans miss that opportunity to side with those African-American community that was protesting outside of his house? Why were they quiet? But two, now, should they capitalize? Do you think you're going to see the Republican Party capitalizing and try to demonize the party based on this donor?
Well, I had not seen this in the national media. I think this was probably a failure on the national media's part as well. And I am not surprised at that, just given the level of bias that we see in the media over and over again. But again, this is a nonpartisan issue. Anyone who had heard and seen evidence of these alleged incredibly heinous crimes should have come forward. So I don't think this should be exploited for partisan points by any means. I do think that it is important to note in general, when someone is in power, it doesn't matter if they have a D or R next to their name, they need to be held accountable.
Okay, so Ameshia, on this case, the maximum sentence is 5 years and 8 months. That's it. State prison. You got 3 deaths. Does that seem like enough at this point? I mean, you've been bringing up, they've been protesting him longer than that.
Absolutely. I think that this is a slap in the face to everyone who has been a victim of his. And mind you, everyone who has been victimized hasn't actually died. There are people who came close to death who are still trying to fight and make sure that he sees his time in prison now. And I think that this is just really disappointing. You do have 2 that died, 2 men that actually died. And it's frustrating that we see that this 5-year sentence or potential 5-year sentence is all that he's going to get. He is literally going out and preying on the least of these, people who are homeless, people who have addiction issues, people who really need help. And you would assume that there would be more that would be done in this case, because he's been doing this, again, as a coordinated effort for years. And until recently, to be honest, and I point to the other guest point as well, the media didn't care. No one picked up on this at all. The first time this story broke news was 6 months ago. And at that point, they were talking about the last person who died.
So, Ameshia, at this point, does it kind of not worry both of you, both you and Carrie, right now? We don't hear about Weinstein. We don't hear about Epstein, us everyday Americans. We don't hear about these names. Now we hear about this until you have a death, until you have a mass sort of prosecution happen. Does it worry you that there are more of these people out there that we're just not being allowed to pay attention to and bring the spotlight onto them? And how do we solve that problem? Real quick, Ameshia, I'll let you start.
Absolutely. I think that we should all be extremely vigilant, because these people don't exist in pockets, and this is not a partisan thing. There are, criminals who are committing these acts on both sides of the aisle, and they get away with it because they're usually very highly known, very highly funded. They're giving money to campaigns, some of them on both sides of the aisle, giving to whomever, Republicans and Democrats. And I think that kind of helps people to brush it aside. And unless the media jumps on it, Americans typically don't know, so they have nothing to fight against.
And Carrie, how do we solve this problem going forward?
Well, I think to your point also, Scottie, I mean, I agree with what was just said by the guest, but also to the point of people who are not in power or not in the spotlight. There are predators who are engaging in these criminal acts as well, to people who are nameless. And, getting evidence is one of the best things you can do to protect yourself. And over, that's how victims can ensure that they will see justice.
We definitely need to educate the public beyond the partisan politics. Thank you, ladies, for joining me and having a respectful conversation on a very, very rough subject.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.